What's up, guys? Doug Polk here, and we're back for another podcast. And this week we're joined by Halsey Miner, the founder of and I'm already my audio already messing up. Good job out of the gate here. We're back this week with Halsey Miner, founder of CNET and CEO of VideoCoin. But before we jump in and talk to him, a couple things I want to go over quickly here on the channel. First off, we've gotten the podcast up across all of the podcasting networks. I believe we're on Spotify, iTunes, as well as a variety of the smaller ones. So if you're on the go and you don't have time to log into YouTube, you can always find the podcast on those various platforms. And also, as far as what we got coming up, guest Tone Vase will be joining us in just a few weeks. Looking forward to that one as well. So let's go ahead and kick it off. Halsey, welcome to the podcast today, man.
Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you. So let's kick it off with just a little overview. You know, who you are for maybe some of the people that aren't as familiar with your background.
Sure, I've been an entrepreneur and innovator for 25 years. During the 90s, I started and built CNET networks into a NASDAQ 100 company. I spun, when we left, we'd earned $1.5 billion. I created and spun out the leading web publishing platform called Vignette. It was an $11 billion company. I left in January of 2000. I was the co-founder and second largest shareholder at Salesforce. I helped the first CEO, John Dillon, for 2.5 years, then Mark for 2 years. Rang the bell in New York Stock Exchange with Mark at Salesforce in 2004 in June. Left, went on, started Google Voice, started a company called OpenDNS, which is about 4% of all DNS. And I was actually the founding investor in the Rhapsody music service, going way back. And then more recently, I started Uphold, which is a Coinbase competitor, very profitable. One of the few, I would say, ways today to be able to connect a U.S. or a European bank account to buy crypto. That's a lot harder than people realize. So started that in 2013 to solve the problem. You know, how do you buy crypto? And ran it for about 2.5 years. Brought somebody else in, and went on to start Live Planet, where we built an end-to-end VR platform. And you know, I built a couple of platforms. So when I started CNET, there was no, believe it or not, web publishing software. So I actually had to build the web publishing software for the industry, and that became an $11 billion company. And that's, you know, we at CNET made about $1 billion on creating that and spinning it out. And then when I was, you know, at CNET, I wanted to do customer relationship software. I wanted to buy some, and Mark came to me Mark Benioff, because I had built, actually at the time, the company that I spun out, Vignette, was the fastest growing enterprise software company in history. CNET was the top 10 website in the world. And so that combination of a website and enterprise software was a good combination for what he wanted to do, which was Salesforce. And so instead of just buying software, I built a whole platform that my company could use with Mark. And then, you know, what we've done today is we've built this amazing camera connected to a cloud, connected to endpoints that takes VR video, which is, you know, a huge amount of data. We process it, we send it to all platforms, just like you mentioned to your users that you're on all these platforms. We take VR video, we send it to YouTube, Facebook, HTC Vive, Oculus, et cetera. Huge amount of computation. And so what we've done is we've combined, my head of engineering built Intel's video streaming cloud, which was bought by Facebook. It's how Facebook got into video. And we combined my expertise in crypto, his deep expertise. He's probably one of the only people in the last 10 years to build a video streaming cloud. And we realized that we could use crypto as a new architecture for computing by using all of these resources around the world that are essentially underutilized for purposes of internet video.
Is that it? You haven't done anything else with your time?
I have 7 kids.
7 kids. Well, that's a ton of kids.
That's a ton of kids.
All right, so you've been busy, man.
I did a couple other things, but yeah, I mean, I think that's a speed tour.
There was a lot to get into there. But
Let's
let's
talk
just take
about
a
the here
step.
and now, though. A
Let's just
lot of
take
fun stuff in the past, but I think the present is very exciting.
So let's just take a step back here. What inspires you to take on so many different projects? And it seems like you're someone that's always trying to be involved in what the latest upcoming thing is with technology. What inspired you to do that?
I think of myself as a relentless problem solver. I have to pull myself back. There's so many things that I want to do, and I mean, not I actually created or co-created four publicly traded companies by 2001, and it was actually too much. I mean, I was just sort of running around with my head cut off, and I mean, I actually created. I don't even say this, but I created a search engine that NBC bought, and it was, and CNET had 40%, NBC had 6%. It became a $4 billion company. I don't even put that on the I don't even put that on the resume list because it's not even around anymore. But but I've learned as I've gotten older to recognize that time is definitely finite, and to work on problems that I think are the most interesting ones. And have the greatest impact, and not just sort of see a problem and try to throw technology at it. For me, it's like a Rubik's cube. Although I've never been able to solve one, it's this ability to kind of move technology around, architecturally to solve a problem has been something that I've just always loved personally. It's not a I've never really had a job. I'm very passionate about these things, and the problems are, to me, really interesting to try to figure out how you use technology to do something that's actually really relevant, not just make a lot of money, but to do something that people actually use and is relevant.
What was it like starting a company that eventually sold for, $1.8 billion with CNET? I assume that experience had to be very rewarding to see something that you built from the ground up become so large, right?
No, that was actually incredibly frustrating. When I left, we were an $8 billion company, and we were a top 10 website in the world. 7 years after I left, we were number 35 in the world, and we were worth 1.8 billion in the sale. So I watched from the time that I left to the time they're sold, about 80% of the value leave. And a bunch of companies like Amazon, who we had more traffic than when I left, ultimately grow into these behemoths. And uh, I believe that CNET had less revenue in 2007 than when I left in 2000. So it was, I left and helped Mark build Salesforce, and that was like straight up. But CNET, I went off the board in 2000. I kind of left completely. Let them run the show. Didn't have to worry about the founder looking over their shoulder. And it was an incredibly frustrating experience to see a company that so dominated, content, end up as a cheap token of CBS buying into the. It was CBS buying into the internet so they could say they had an internet company. The At that point, the direction of the company was not up; it was down. So incredibly frustrating, actually. But my kids told me, because it was always very frustrating for me. They would say, "Well, Dad, it could be worse. You could have started Yahoo."
Yeah, you would feel a little worse if you were Yahoo, that's for sure, or
Yeah,
MySpace.
or MySpace. That's
While,
right.
while we're at it,
He's like, at least you're relevant today.
that is true. I think that's something that I have a couple of smaller online businesses, and I've never really debated selling either of them at this point, but I do feel like if that day ever came and I sold it to someone, I would want it. I would hope that they were going to do a good job for the business and build it and grow it. And so I guess in some regards, it has to feel kind of upsetting to see your baby run into the ground.
It's very unusual to see people take a business from an entrepreneur and take it to a better place. And it's unfortunate, but I think it happens. I've had this conversation with a bunch of people before, who are entrepreneurs who've experienced something similar. But hey, look, there are very few companies. I can say this: there are very few companies that were started during that time period that are still relevant today. And almost every search engine's gone. I mean, even Yahoo's gone, basically, right? So I built something. I've done even vignettes around. It's called OpenText. So I've definitely built companies to last. I put good management teams in place. I put good processes in place. They've been able to survive their founder. So even though in 2007 it was bought for a mere fraction of what it was worth when I was running it, it was still a multi-billion-dollar company. So
I feel like you're uniquely situated to have seen the world of tech kind of, on the big come up with the internet, and then also see the way that cryptocurrency has been evolving over the course of the last decade. So do you see any similarities between what's happening now and, for example, the dot-com bubble, or what kind of comparisons would you draw between the two?
I think there are a lot of comparisons. I don't want to say they're identical, but they have a lot of the same characteristics. When I was starting CNET, a lot of people were writing about how the internet was just for porn. The first business model on the internet was undoubtedly porn. They're the people who monetized first. They were the first group of advertisers. They've typically been the early adopters of.
And now they're in cryptocurrency.
Well, they are, but there's a whole nother group of bad guys that were around in cryptocurrency, right? So everybody, when I was, starting out in 2012, there weren't a lot of people talking about the positive potential of cryptocurrency. People couldn't get over Silk Road, and these stories. I mean, I ran a media company, and it's the cheap, easy story to tell, right? You just, you go to the really dark place and you make that the story. And that's what a lot of reporters do when they start out with these new companies. I've been through it over and over again. I mean, the story about Salesforce, were that it was not safe to put your data in the cloud. I remember, even Gartner, who's the big research group, they used to write about this. And Mark Benioff used to call them the whores of the status quo. But I mean, it's always, when you're new, right? It's so easy. You have no credibility yet. It's so easy to be dismissive, and it's so easy to write the cheap, easy article that's the negative one. So that's really kind of characterized the life of cryptocurrency. You've got people like Jamie Dimon now who are still, out there, idiotically stating that it's nothing, and
While meanwhile trying to develop it on all fronts.
Meanwhile trying to develop it internally. I mean,
sorry, not to cut you off, but specifically Jamie Dimon is one of the people that I guess I would say I have the least respect for out of basically anyone that has anything positive or negative about cryptocurrency in general, because it's so two-faced what he's doing. He's attacking it on one side and then trying to build infrastructure on the other, and it's very obvious that he's doing that.
Well, he may be doing that, but I just think he's stupid. I really do. I don't think this is actually a clever kind of thing. I put together a list of common quotes. Like, for instance, the New York Times said in like 1919 that rockets could never travel in space because they had nothing to push off. And the founder of the Digital Equipment Corporation, which was the smaller company than IBM, said the world doesn't need more than 5 personal computers. I mean, there's like a long list of people who've said really, really, really dumb things. And I put Jamie Dimon in that. I think to give him, I think to assume that he's kind of cleverly, disguising his own efforts. I don't think so. I think he's actually not very smart. And I think to run these big banks, you actually don't need to be very smart. You need to be a really good politician. What has a bank done that's innovative in the last 50 years besides stop giving out toasters when you open an account? I mean, really, that's it, right? So Jamie Dimon didn't get there because he came up with some new idea. He got there because he screwed over a bunch of other people on the way to the top, and he outmaneuvered people, and that's why he's there. He's not there because he's some brilliant innovator. He's there because because he's a politician. He's good at manipulating, salary and compensation for his people. He rode the coattails of somebody. I mean, this is banking, right? I mean, this is the industry. He is the leader of the industry that that generates $37 billion in fees a year from bounce checks. And just think about that. 37 billion. If we made banks charge the 25 cents a bounce check cost, it would be a $37 billion tax benefit. I mean, tax reduction.
I think you cut out there.
Hold on. Let me just.
Call from Nugent Design.
All right. While you figure it out here.
Yeah, I should be here. Let me just.
Call from Nugent Design B.
Okay.
Let me get rid of this.
I'm gonna feel.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I mean, it would be $37 billion to go back to the people who, have the least amount of money.
Your video cut out here, by the way.
You did? Hold on a
Yeah.
second. Let me see. You, me. There. Okay,
All right,
good.
we're back. Nice, good.
Yeah. I mean, this is why when I got involved with Uphold, I was really focused on the monetary aspects of it. And just because the banking industry is just so corrupt. And I don't mean that it really is, right? I mean, the things that they do are insane.
Look at Wells Fargo. They were just levied a $1 billion fine? I believe it was $1 billion.
But think about what happened, right? Think about that, right? So they sue Wells Fargo for $1 billion. Do you realize that not 1 cent of that comes out of the paycheck of the people who did it? All that $1 billion comes out of their stockholders. So that means that if you're a working class American and you have Wells Fargo in your portfolio because it's a safe stock, and they do something like this, you just had your money taken away. So the federal government loves when Wells Fargo does this because they bring in $1 billion, but they take it from normal people. So if what happened is that the banks were held accountable, I mean, the people in the banks were held accountable, we'd have a totally different industry from the one that we have. I mean, I think Bank of America paid $16 billion in fees for all they did. Who did that come out of? That came out of shareholders. It didn't come out of anybody's. It didn't even come out of bonuses. You got guys like John Thain, who got a $70 million bonus for bankrupting Merrill Lynch, and he just went on to become CEO of some other company. And I saw he's on the board of some company now, and they're talking about how amazing it was they were able to get John Thain to join their board. So early on, I think what's exciting about blockchain is it's now spread out to a whole bunch of different kinds of solutions, and the conversation is not just how it changes finance. That's what's kind of happened in the last really 2 years, and I think that's great because it makes it more like the internet, in terms of its sort of broad utility. But so far, crypto has done very little, if really nothing, to change kind of the banking status quo. I think that will change, but I don't think none of that has kind of changed yet.
It's not nearly large enough to change it at this point.
Not yet. All things in time.
Well, hopefully. The idea is definitely that we don't want people losing $37 billion on bounce checks anymore. That seems rather needless to me. So where do you think we're at in terms of current adoption levels? Do you see, we saw a big decline in overall price from mid-January to, really the, start of April. Do you think that we're still kind of in like a I'm going to use the word hype phase where people are super excited and that we might see another bear market like we just did? Do you think that we've kind of normalized to some extent? Where do you think that we're at sort of on the trajectory of the value of cryptocurrency?
I mean, I still think we're very early. I mean, the truth is that none of these blockchain things have really done anything yet. But if you go back to the internet, I mean, CNET and Yahoo were two of virtually the only profitable companies, which is why we ended up in the NASDAQ 100. All of these companies had no revenue, certainly no profitability. And, a lot of people question whether any of these companies would ever turn into anything. And for, for a long period of time, for 5, 6, 7, even around 2002, when there was a crash in the internet, a lot of people said, oh, well, that was a whole, experiment that went wrong. So I think we're very early, but I think we're going to see rotation out of things. We're forking Ethereum, but what we're doing in VideoCoin. But it wouldn't surprise me to see a new kind of Ethereum, and then a new kind of Ethereum, and a new kind. I think there's a lot of experimentation that's going on right now. I think you can assume that the vast, vast, vast majority of things won't work. And right now, the market has been such that whether they're going to work or not work, they've all kind of gone up. I think over time, the market's going to get people are going to get a little more careful, how they're using their money. But I think we're still pretty early, and I think there are going to be a lot of bubbles and busts along the way. But I think generally, if you look at it, I told my mother-in-law back in 2006 to buy Salesforce stock when it was like a $2 billion company. Now it's like 80. And I said, it's going to go up and down, but it's going to go more up than down. And I kind of feel like that's sort of the case for crypto.
Did you say something about an Ethereum fork?
What's that?
Sorry, did you say Ethereum fork?
Yeah, I mean, anybody who has any credibility, who's telling you they're going to do anything at scale, they have to tell you they have to fork Ethereum, because Ethereum has absolutely no ability to operate, either quickly right now, although Plasma is trying to change that, or scale up. So Ethereum is a good first idea for how you create a programmable blockchain, but it does not scale for large we're going after 82% of the internet data, which is video. It's a massive, think about, having a blockchain turn on video. I mean, it has to be exceedingly quick and massive scale. And even the founders of Ethereum will tell you it doesn't scale to do that. So there's a lot of hardcore development just around these platforms that people will be using, and that'll could go on for another 10 years, where people are constantly improving, the underlying architecture of the blockchain.
What do you think of Ethereum's move over to proof of stake? I know a lot of people who feel like they're not going to be successful with it. There's a variety of opinions out there. Do you have one on the topic?
Yeah, so we're forking Ethereum, and we will create our own proof of stake. I think it's going to be very hard for them to do that. See, it's very hard to build a general purpose tool, because you have to build something that satisfies every possible use case, right? So we're building a proof of stake, but it's just for our application. It's much, much easier to do that. So, it takes, Salesforce didn't start it as a platform. It started as a CRM application, right? And so we built that into a platform. We started specific, when I spun Vignette out, the product was called Story Server, and it's because the first buyers were all media companies. But then we realized, hey, it wasn't just media companies doing web publishing; it was marketing, and people who sold cars. I mean, it became everything. But it's much easier to start with something specific and solve a specific problem, and then branch out. So I think looking at all the things that people want to do with proof of stake, and suggesting they're going to solve them all with one ubiquitous solution, I think it goes against pretty much everything I've learned in 25 years in technology.
I would agree with that, not just in technology, but just in general. You should almost always figure out what you can do extremely well, or the best, and go after that segment of the market, because there are so many different areas that you can explore. Why not do one well? Why try and do everything somewhat poorly, or some things okay? Pick what you're good at and fight there. That's how big businesses are really made, right?
Dead on the money. You're exactly right. Exactly right.
So when you say we're forking Ethereum, do you mean VideoCoin?
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit?
I mean, there'll be a lot of custom development. I think anybody, at least who's doing something large scale, who tells you that the coin is going to be a relatively easy part of it, I think is not, is either not truthful or they just don't understand the problems. These are very hard things to build, and like I said, let's keep in mind, nobody's really built one of these yet, right? I mean, there's a lot of promise, but you're looking at some pretty big engineering challenges. So we'll fork Ethereum, but there'll be a lot of our own code that has to run, because again, we want to compete with Amazon Web Services, which has massive amounts of video running over it. It's got to start instantaneously. We have to compensate all these people. We have to know these people have resources that can be used. We have to know that they have been used. I mean, there are a lot of things that need to be built, but it's very so Salesforce. I ended up putting a lot of money in. Larry Ellison put money in. No VCs put money in, because nobody believed that any company would ever trust their sales data in the cloud. So security people were the ones who were standing in the way, of our success. There's nothing standing in the way of our success like that. In fact, every media company wants us to be successful, to cut their costs and to wean themselves off of AWS and Amazon, who they compete with. But we're building a super we're building a very large system. Now the good news is my CTO built Intel's video streaming cloud. There were three of them. There was Intel, there was Amazon Web Services, there were Google, and kind of Microsoft. And Intel didn't want to compete with their other data centers that use their chips, so they sold it off to YouTube. So they sold it off to Facebook. So we built, our engineering team, we built one of these big ones before and run the data center. So we know how to do that. And we've got really good engineers to be able to handle, building all of the Coinbase stuff. But it's a pretty big engineering challenge.
Let's just Eli 5 for some of the viewers here who don't really know about VideoCoin or what you're trying to do. What problem are you trying to solve with VideoCoin?
Yeah, so there are a lot of people who have sort of identified problems. This is one of those problems where everybody knows they have the problem. And when I mean everybody, what I mean is that if you look at the real creators of content, the biggest, let's take the studios and the media companies who create a lot of the content, Netflix, for instance, right? They have massive amounts of streaming content now. And if you just rolled it back 5 years, most of these companies had almost no streaming. It was all broadcast. It was all over cable. They had one signal. They bounced it off a satellite. They were done. No more costs. Now, every media company is now distributing their content to over the internet to tens of thousands, to tens of millions of people. And they're paying those costs, which they didn't pay before, and they don't know how to monetize it. And so they're seeing these rapidly escalating costs. And so today, video is 80% of the internet, growing at 25% compound annual, right? So all these big media companies are getting hit with these massive fees that are rapidly escalating. And the people who provide those services, primarily Amazon and Google, are their direct competitors. So if you go look at Amazon Web Services, the part of Amazon that's making all the money that they're using to go after retailers and media companies is Amazon Web Services. So they're actually funneling money into Amazon's only profitable business ever that they're using to go after these media companies. So then video itself is kind of at an inflection point. We're going to 4K, 8K, and then we're even going to turn video into reality with VR, right? So video is doing this crazy thing itself, right? So you've got rapidly escalating costs, video at an inflection point, just in kind of what it is. And you've got Amazon using the money from AWS to pummel media companies. So we have advisors like, Hanno Bassa, who's the CTO of, 20th Century Fox, one of the top 3 largest media companies in the world. These guys don't want to be on Amazon anymore. They want to cut their costs 60-80%. So what we do is we use, let's say to start, about 20% of servers sitting in data centers today are unused. They're called zombies. So it's about $20 billion of just unused capacity. And they can be used to mine video coins. So they can encode it, which is compress it, they can store it, and they can stream it. And the computation part, the encoding part, is actually kind of a big deal. What's interesting about being a video coin miner is if you're a miner for any coin, you need to buy a special card. If you're a video coin miner, every chip has the ability to encode video. So even your phone, for instance, has an encoder. So you could even use your phone in theory. So that means all this unused capacity sitting in data centers can become video coin miners overnight. So we really think we can dramatically lower the cost by just taking the same model that Airbnb and Uber have and applying it using the blockchain to commoditizing all of this hardware that's unused across the globe.
I talked with the CEO of a smaller internet hosting company, and he was discussing what his thoughts were, because there were a couple of different currencies out there that are doing something similar. I think I see Filecoin and Storage, I believe, does something similar as well.
They're focusing on file storage. Yeah.
Okay, so it's a little bit different. Obviously, this is a bit more specific to video, but the idea of storing the data is similar. And a problem that he said that he has not seen a good solution to is the speed, because you can host the data, but if it has a negative effect dramatically, especially as it becomes more decentralized, on the speed at which you're able to view the data or view the video, then that becomes a major problem for people at a user end level. Do you see a solution to that?
Yeah. So if he read the Filecoin and the Storage white papers, he would not find a solution to that problem. If he read our white paper, he would get a solution to it. So ours is totally based on proof of stake. So that's where we come back to this whole proof of stake notion. So we have to have sub-millisecond speeds. The only way you can do that is that data centers basically stake the network, and then if their resources aren't there, then they lose what they've staked into the network. So that's why I said we're building proof of stake specifically for this. And my guess is you should tell them to go read our white paper, because we're probably the only people who have laid out, very specifically a method to solve this problem. Just so you understand, we're different. There's a big difference between competing with Amazon Web Services and video and competing with Dropbox. And so there are like 3 different players, and they're all competing with the file storage business. We're a competitor for, huge data infrastructure for, as I said, encoding, storing, and streaming video. But we've got, like, for instance, one of the two founders of Akamai, is one of our advisors. So I mean, we have like the real people who've really done this stuff. And our white paper was not sort of a conceptual high flyer. It's a very specific document that lays out how we handle problems, specifically ones exactly like you described. So tell your friend to go read our white paper, and he'll feel a little better about the problem.
I think his brother actually works at Akamai, so that's actually too funny. So is the storage decentralized, or is it centralized for the individual videos?
So it's all decentralized, right? Because that's the one thing I've kind of consistently done is sort of found the new platform. So internet was the new platform. I built the platform for publishing. Salesforce became the new platform for enterprise software. I did Google Voice, which was a voice platform, and OpenDNS was a new platform for DNS. As 4 to 5% of global DNS now runs on it. So shoot, I apologize. I get to the present. I forgot your question. I was talking about video as a platform.
I was asking if the files individually are decentralized.
Yeah. So this new platform for computing, to me, is the giveaway was how Bitcoin mining works, which is for the first time in history, you can send people software and they can run it on their computer. They can get paid in a global currency, and they'll get that money and they'll go buy more hardware. And it's an amazing thing. I mean, even modest unknown coins have miners out there who, put a computer up and start mining and start getting paid. It's it's a completely new way of sort of thinking. So the decentralization is needed because it lowers the cost. The decentralized means we can run in any data center anywhere on the world, and it allows us to tap into all this unused capacity. In time, people are going to realize that video, using commoditizing computing is going to be way bigger than commoditizing cars or commoditizing places that people live. So, in our case, we're talking about $20 billion of computers that are not used at all. This isn't like somebody's house that isn't used on the weekends, or cars that aren't used during the day. And you also don't have any of the human problems, right? Like if I'm Uber, I got to get some person in the back of my car, and if I'm Airbnb, I got to let somebody live in my house. If you want to use your computer, you just load software in, and the next thing you know, this global currency starts showing up that you can take to an exchange and convert. So my contention is, video is probably going to be much bigger as a sharing commodity than either Uber or Airbnb.
That's a pretty bold claim.
I don't think if you just measure it in just the size, right? And I mean, look at video itself is growing at 25% compound annual. I mean, it doesn't, even if it was, 25% compound annual, if it was a $10 billion market, it doesn't take that long for it to get to be a $50 billion market. And there's nothing about video that looks like it's slowing down. There's nothing. In fact, everything we know about it is it's accelerating. I mean, look, it was just announced by CNET that I still do read it, that Apple is working on a VR headset that has two 8K monitors in it. I mean, think about that. That's 16K over the internet being delivered. That's 4 times, 4K is 4 times HD. 8K is 16 times. It doesn't double. It's exponential. So.
Yeah, and also I think we're seeing more and more platforms, at least with social media, moving over to video over images, to increase user retention and up watch time and all of that type of good stuff. So I do think that we're going to see video more and more dominate the digital landscape, at least in terms of the types of content that people consume.
Yeah, I don't see it. The end is not in sight.
So do you have any competitors then? You say that these other guys are more focused on files versus video.
They are. They're totally focused on files. No, I don't think. I mean, here's the thing. Video is such a hard thing to do. I mean, there are just so few hardcore video engineers. Deva, who built Intel's video cloud, he has 7 patents in video. It's there's a small group of developers in the world that can do this. Deva's actually built a video streaming cloud. I don't think anybody. I mean, there probably are very few people in the world who could say we're doing what we're doing, and actually even people even think they're credible. And we've. I mean, our whole ICO has been totally run with private, institution, very smart institutional money. We didn't do a public ICO or any of that.
The general market's moving towards that anyway.
Well, I mean, for us, look, I mean, we have an extraordinary team that's done extraordinary things already, and we had the ability to go and just get the best names in the industry, behind us without having to expose ourselves to any sort of public risk. And so, I guess we want to be the class of the industry in terms of the quality of the people, how, promises, deliveries, all that kind of stuff. So, this seemed to be the right way to go for us, but it's very hard. I mean, I think it would be, there aren't a lot of people who could legitimately say they're doing what we're doing, and have people. I mean, somebody could probably go raise 10 million by conning people, but they would never have the kinds of people that we have who are, who have basically funded an ICO.
10 million would almost be a small ICO the way that
I mean, there have been
changed these days. I think yep, you're back. All right, cool.
Yeah, there have been scams that have obviously been, many multiples of that. But yeah, I mean, there just aren't that many people out there who, who know enough about video to even claim. There are video services where they store your video like storage and Filecoin, and they stream it. They're more like Akamai competitors. Um, but but no, there's literally nobody in our space.
If it's that difficult to accomplish and there are so few people that could even credibly be trying to do it, are you at all worried about actually successfully getting there?
No, because everything I've done has been a very hard, technical problem. I mean, starting with CNET, I had to build my own web publishing software. At CNET, my engineers were all out of Bell Labs and Belcore. They were in Watchung, New Jersey. My first 50 engineers at CNET were better than Google's first 50. They were all PhDs from Carnegie Mellon and MIT. And those are the only people who had any experience with the internet in 94, 95, 96. And to actually publish, I actually had to build my own web publishing software, so it didn't exist. So when I left, CNET was an $8 billion company, but then it was an $11 billion company. And so the software I created actually ended up becoming a bigger company than CNET itself. So I've always had to take on very difficult technical hurdles, because I think anything worth doing is, unfortunately, or anything that's where you have a chance of being an outsized success, requires to have, amazing engineering to pull it off.
But just because you've had successful endeavors in the past and have accomplished your goals doesn't necessarily mean that the ones you take on in the future are guaranteed successes too, right?
There are no guaranteed successes in life. I tell everybody when I start something that success is really easy. You just have to do everything perfectly.
I mean, easy enough.
Yeah, what could be easier than that, right?
Not too much. So let's branch out here and talk about what's going on in the rest of the industry. Are there any other currencies that you find exciting, that you like what they're doing?
I don't spend a lot of time trying to learn about others. I've got a lot to do myself. I think I'm more interested in things like, the basic kinds of infrastructure stuff that's going to take this from being a bunch of good ideas to being a bunch of credible, to being a credible technology platform. I watched the internet. I mean, the internet was very frustrating early on because it was very difficult to get on. And I don't just mean slow modems. It was very hard to get the software loaded into your PC to connect reliably. And so, I'm looking at, what are the kinds of things that credibly create a platform around which real businesses can be built. And Ethereum is great because it kind of points to something, much bigger. And people are now very excited about what the blockchain can do. I'm not convinced that we don't need a couple more generations of that kind of stuff, in order to get to where, where I'm spending a lot of time thinking right now is, on the one hand, we've got, a lot of very young people with, very wild ideas about, building new kinds of businesses. On the other hand, we've got, very large corporations who are not launching coins and have real business processes, but they don't know how to innovate. And there's a big area in the middle, which is where you bring the innovation from younger people who are, coming up
Damn
with these
kids,
things,
all their crazy ideas.
It's just you've got most of these people who are building these new, like ride sharing coins. They haven't been part of a big business running, doing business process engineering, right? What was so special and so successful about Salesforce is we became an incredibly innovative company, but we applied it to non-innovative businesses. We actually allowed any company to become an innovator by adopting our infrastructure. So I'm, I spend a lot of time thinking about how do we get this stuff that's really innovative, that everybody's kind of kicking out all these ideas, right? And then you got all these people, Oracle and, IBM, whatever, and they're all doing these blockchain things internally. And I mean, they're hopeless, because they don't really understand how to innovate. And I should say on top of that, none of them want to innovate. If anybody thinks that Oracle or IBM wants to blow up their business model and have to learn a whole new skill set to make money, they don't understand the computer business, right? So I think there's a big, I think I'm really interested in kind of how do we kind of bring these two worlds together so that we take the innovation that's going on and we apply it to real huge business processes, like, for instance, supply chain. I think we're just
Like,
scratching the surface right now.
Like Walton chain is something in that area.
Yeah, I think there's starting to be, things that are starting to emerge that go after these problems, and they're very good problems to go after because they're real and they have massive amounts of dollars attached to solving them.
What about some of the Ethereum competitors? Have you taken a look at any of the other ones out there?
Little bit. I mean, I don't see any right now that that I think are likely to knock Ethereum off. I think somebody will do that, but I don't think we're seeing it right now.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting because we see a couple of major competitors who are not very close to actually achieving full functionality.
Yes.
EOS,
Yeah.
Cardano, these things are sort of years away. I think
theories.
Maybe less than years. I tend to get blasted whenever I say something wrong on this podcast by the sub communities. I don't want to upset any of the fans of EOS or Cardano, but they're still a ways out from being functional. So it's kind of difficult to say, I think, with those currencies. What are your thoughts, if you have any, on how large those values are relative to the fact that they're not, truly functional yet?
I learned a long time ago not to try to attach valuations to things because it's almost impossible to ever, you can't be right and you never make people happy, either way. But look, I think, and I don't mean this is a bad thing, but those are different theories for how to do stuff. And I think it's important that people are putting forth theories, and somebody may make, an EOS or a Cardano successful. I think if there's one thing I could try to communicate to everybody in the industry, this stuff is really, really hard. And so nobody is going to wake up, have a vision in the shower, walk out, and 1 year later transform the world. Because I mean, they can have the idea that transforms the world, but we just have to have rational expectations about how long this stuff takes to really build technology that works. And look, I had to build a web publishing platform to do internet publishing. I mean, and that I launched that company. CNET launched in '93, and I launched that in '95, and it became a non-CNET company in late '96. So you had a whole bunch of years where you literally had no web publishing software. I mean, CNET was the first website to publish out of a database in '95. It was all flat files, So this stuff takes time. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen. But look, I think a lot of the protocol stuff is really interesting, and it will continue for a while. It's very hard to know who's gonna win. There are a lot of theories, but it all comes down to those who can take the theory and then they can really execute to build something that's unique and solves real specific problems.
So you're coming at it more from a practical application standpoint. It seems like, regarding the tech.
Look, here's the way I look at it. With what we're doing, for instance. So we have massive data processing needs. If you take one of our VR cameras, which is 4K, and you send it out to all the platforms, and you stream it 7 days a week, 24 hours a day for 30 days. That's $29,000 worth of costs in the Google Cloud. One camera. Now the company's called Live Planet because I want them everywhere. So we have to get the cost down, right? So the reason that Vignette was so successful by CNET is because I knew what I wanted to build at CNET. I was doing content publishing. So I built the software that I needed to do, and then I turned it out and let the rest of the world use it. So what we're doing with VideoCoin is we're literally solving a problem that we have. We have a 4K, encoding, storage, and distribution problem. So we know exactly, we know we will solve one problem. At Salesforce, we were successful building the thing because we wanted to solve the CRM problem. And then once we solved the CRM problem, we said, hey, we can generalize this. So I think, and you said this yourself, and I think it's a very astute observation, which is, to the extent that you can focus on a problem and solve it, and then begin to, to incorporate other use cases, you're much more likely to be successful. And, and I think with some of these ideas, the Cardanos, the EOS, I think if they could kind of focus, their theory around a set of use cases, I think it's much more likely to be successful than these things kind of being theoretical frameworks that aren't kind of ground in somebody's reality.
But what about currencies that are more based around being, peer-to-peer digital cash and store of value? Obviously, Bitcoin being the biggest one. Do you not see value in that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I see value in the experimentation, right? I think, I think it's really good that a whole bunch of people are taking different approaches to how you do money. I think one of the problems, and this is one of the ones I addressed at Uphold, which was, how do you have a stable store of value? And that's why the Uphold service has 30 fiat currencies that you can move in and out of. But, I mean, look, we're in a period of intense, experimentation. I mean, that's really what it is. It's intense experimentation. And, I have, I'm a defender of the internet bubble, and I'll tell you why. So $9 trillion was basically the value of the internet companies that were sort of on the major exchanges. And, a lot of that was wiped out between 2000 and 2002. And so, people would say, oh my God, we wasted all that money. Like that, what a crazy period. It should never have been allowed to happen. And what I say in my defense is that, what? We emerged as a country, the United States, with all the major internet companies coming out of the first phase of the internet before 2000. And the reason that we did is because we tried every idea. And I would love to tell people that we could just try the good ideas, but we don't know what they are, And so the only way that you find the good ideas is by funding the bad ideas too. And so it's actually a very, socially, globally, it moves the world faster, far faster to try all of these ideas simultaneously than to kind of move forward and then get scared of yourself, and move forward and get scared of yourself, and move forward and get scared of yourself. And so, for the things that are good and the things that deliver real innovation that affect people's lives, the faster they get tried, the better we are generally. So there's going to be waste.
Some virtual Darwinism, if you will.
It's virtual Darwinism. And you know what? This is becoming kind of a modern thing. And, before this Darwinism was going on just in the United States, now it's happening globally. So we're getting, it's interesting because I was listening to Jeff Bezos, said something very interesting on TV. He was talking about, having 1 trillion people in, by having space colonies and stuff. And he said, if we had 1 trillion people, we'd have 20 Einsteins, just based on the math, right? So, I mean, it's kind of the same formula here, right? I mean, the more of these things you fund, the more great minds ultimately get to build businesses.
So, okay, so it seems like you're in favor of basically people trying all kinds of different things here, but again, you see the real value being in how businesses and how people can use platforms to actually better their lives. Would that be a fair position?
Well,
fair analysis.
When I was, in the early days of the internet, the only things that I could see that the internet were going to do were all good things. I had no comprehension for all of the bad things that would ultimately be unleashed, particularly around privacy. And so, I'm a lot more, I'm older now, and I'm justifiably more cynical. So I think they're going to be, you know, there's going to be the good with the bad. But I think in general, there's more good than bad. And so I think the faster we move forward with, the innovation that the genuine innovation that blockchain is really bringing, I think the better it is for everybody. And people should just try not to be one of those, try hard not to be one of those group of people who are, who are a bad part of the experiment. So people should take time and really try to learn about what they're doing. And I've heard, one guy said, well, my theory is if I hear about an ICO 3 times, I invest in it. That works until it doesn't. so a little more sophisticated approach to these things is ultimately going to be the one that carries the day.
The ICO market has changed drastically since its inception, and month over month continues to decline in terms of overall profitability. I mean, to be honest with you, if you bought almost any of the bigger ICOs from October or November of 2017, then yeah, you probably did great. But
That's right.
there are plenty that have failed and will continue to fail. So definitely would not advise that strategy moving forward. As the ICO market changes, let's actually change gears just for a moment here. Let's talk about government regulation, because I think one of the biggest problems that crypto is going to face as it grows is the fact that it is disrupting some of these traditional industries, most importantly banking, especially as that grows, payment processing, really a lot of different industries that have been built around the status quo and are going to have lobbies to some extent in different governments trying to lobby them to I'm sure make some negative impacts on cryptocurrency. Are you at all worried about that? Do you think governments will embrace this? What about maybe the U.S. in particular? What do you think might happen here? What are your thoughts?
Look, I stopped running Uphold because of how regulatory intensive it was. We had to buy part of a U.S. bank to get access.
Sorry, you stopped running a what?
Uphold. Yeah, I started Uphold. I set up Uphold, which I started as one of the few, it's a Coinbase competitor, one of the few companies you can connect your U.S. or European bank account. Very, very, you've got very regulatory heavy to be able to move money from the banking system to be able to buy crypto. So I've been familiar with it for a long time. I have a bunch of thoughts about this. The first thing is, when the internet bubble happened, all the investment banks, the stock exchanges made a fortune, utter fortune. Let's remember that all this stuff that's going on is not making Merrill Lynch money, is not making Bank of America money, is not making the NASDAQ money. So we're replicating infrastructure that made a lot of money on the last big bubble, right? So we're not going to have Goldman Sachs to the same extent, on our side as when the internet kind of bubble was going on. The other thing is, when I was launching Uphold, and trying this really hard thing of connecting the U.S. banking system into it to buy crypto, what I pointed out to people was there, even though this new kind of revolutionary technologies come along, it hasn't been. Let me step back. Come at this another way. So in the mid 1970s, the airlines were deregulated, and so were the stock brokerage firms. So virtually nobody flew on airplanes because they were too expensive, and the government set the rates, and very few people had brokers because they couldn't afford them. So with deregulation, we got Southwest and we got Charles Schwab. Totally changed. Now the government purposely deregulated. So in the case of airlines, the Civil Aviation Bureau was set up in 1938, and at the time there were 29 airlines, and their job was to create competition. And so from 1939 until 1974, there were 79 airlines, new airlines, that applied for a license to operate. Of those 79, 0 were allowed. So from 1939 until 1974, we went from 28 airlines to 16. So it became less and less and less and less and less competitive over time. And then the government said, you know what, the way we're going to solve all these problems and let people be able, normal people be able to fly and normal people be able to get stock brokerages is that we're going to deregulate and we're not going to set the price anymore. What's interesting here is that despite the fact that banks keep destroying themselves every 20 years, the government did not say, hey guys, let's create new competitors. Like, that is not what's happening right now, right? In fact, it's almost impossible to get a new banking license. So we have all this innovation and everybody's going, oh yeah, we're going to overturn, we're going to, create this new world. But the government has not stated their stated intention, even though it should be, to create a better system for everybody. They have not agreed on that as a, as a party line. So, but I'm going to say this. When in the early phase of the internet, everybody said that Jeff Bezos should be collecting local and state taxes, right? That he was ripping off everybody, local governments, local and state governments. And then he was, because he wasn't, where you went to your local store and paid taxes, bought online. It wasn't. And that went for 17 years. So the government was pretty enlightened to allow that to happen for as long as they did. So they've shown, some regulatory, the willingness to not kind of throw all the regulatory tools at stuff. The SEC has been going after straight up scams. And if the SEC didn't do that, we would feel, then we would honestly feel the SEC is not doing its job. The bigger problem, right, is my thought is, as soon as the SEC or the FDIC is done making people pay for all the damage they did during the banking crisis, then they should come and go after these guys, because you've got, the scams that are going on, which I appreciate the SEC trying to shut down, they're actually minuscule compared to the ones that the banks have done. So there's while I appreciate what they're doing, there's not really equity in the system. I personally believe the United States they're currently driving everybody offshore. I mean, that's clear. Uphold is a Cayman company. The VideoCoin is a Cayman company. Everybody's trying to find ways of getting out of the United States. I do think that the SEC is going to come around to a somewhat enlightened point of view and realize that, this innovation cannot leave the United States. I mean, everybody's talking about how they want to avoid the US being eclipsed by China. Well, a great way to do that would be to own this industry. And the only way you can do that is by creating a fertile environment for these kinds of businesses to be able to take root and not smother them with regulation.
While that might be true, I would say historically the government has shown very little capacity to understand at times what will put it ahead or behind the curve. And so I would expect them more so to act within their own best interest than to try and further the country by embracing technologies that they might view as competitive.
Well, I mean, look, banking is different. So, but I'll give you another example. The only reason that Google and Voice, which I created was called Grand Central, exists, is because all of the big phone companies have an obligation, to run wires to everybody who wants a phone, but they also have to power that line even if power goes down. So 911 is always on. The big phone companies went to the FCC and said, companies like Skype need to be able to do the same thing, which of course they can't do because they don't control the wires. And they tried to
Skype can't control Skype.
Skype can control Skype, exactly. And so I mean, it ended up being a court case, went in front of the FCC, and the FCC did the right thing. The big difference, that you're right, is that this is about money in banking. Banking has an enormous lobbyist group. They spend massive amounts of money, and many of them end up in banking. I mean, as we know, many from banking end up in government. So I don't know. You could really, you could take both sides of the bet. I'm hoping that in the U.S. they see that there's this obvious ability to go other places, and as a result, they try to create an environment here that's at least not hostile to innovation.
We've seen that at the state level. There are various states who at different time periods have tried to attract businesses to come there by offering them reduced taxes, at least compared to where they were before. We've seen Wyoming. I want to say it's Wyoming. It's Wyoming,
Yeah,
or
Wyoming.
Wyoming is taking a lot of very positive steps towards allowing cryptocurrency businesses and giving them breaks there. So, that's something that I hope to see from our government. But maybe I'm a little bit angry because as someone who was a professional poker player who played online, 7 years ago, one day I woke up and the government said, you know what, your job is not legal here anymore. I'll see you later. By the way, you still owe us 40% wherever you go, which was just very, very unfair. And it's weird having that experience coming from poker into crypto and then seeing a lot of people like, oh, they can't make it illegal. They can't do that. They're not going to. I'm like, guys, look, you know what? Like, I just never count anything out when it comes to our government making stupid decisions because they can absolutely do those things.
Well, I have to tell you, the state problem is the main problem. When I said I left because I was getting worn out by all the regulatory stuff, here's the problem. If you want to be in the business of moving money, me being able to send you money, right? If you're in Europe, you get one license, and you can do that for all of Europe. If I want to build a service like Uphold, where I can send you dollars or I can send you Bitcoin, me from California, you from wherever you would happen to be, in the United States, you need 48 separate licenses. Every single state has a different process. They have a different business plan. They have different rules. They have different. So the plan when I left was to go and meet with like 30 state regulators and begin a 2.5-year, $7 million process to go state by state by state by state by state to get all of those licenses. And that's what Coinbase had to do. And there's some states that they just they said forget it, it's too difficult.
Well, now we know where the Coinbase support team was because they definitely weren't online.
I just thought that was my person. I didn't know you were having the same problem.
Actually, they closed my account down, and then I inquired why, and after 6 months, they responded saying it's closed. I was like, all right, story checks out.
Well, they're consistent if nothing else. The state by state problem is, we ended up having to buy part of a bank to get around it, but it's the single biggest problem that the federal government has in getting any crypto company to be domiciled in the United States.
What type of crypto companies do you think that we still have room for innovation in? I see like the mining industry has become so ginormous. It's actually funny the effect that it's had on graphics cards for video gaming.
Oh yeah.
I went to Fry's a week or two ago to build a computer, and I was buying some parts. And I was talking about graphics cards with the person working there, and she was like, "Oh, it's just so sad for all the gamers. Like, all the prices have gone up because of mining." And I'm like, "Oh, you know stuff about cryptocurrencies?" She's like, "No, I just know mining is a thing now." And I'm like, "All right, yeah." So I mean, we've seen a lot. There's a lot of room for growth in various aspects of the cryptocurrency industry. Mining specifically is dominated by just an individual player, Bitmain, right? It has almost the lion's share of the ASICs that are produced. But maybe what other areas you
produce their own ASICs now? They're now designing their own. They're not even like buying from commercial providers anymore because there's so much money in, but they're all using chips from NVIDIA, which is why these gamers are hurt from pricing. So, I mean, I guess, do you need a high-end graphics card for Fortnite? I mean, I guess you can play it on your Xbox.
Do you play Fortnite?
I told you I have 7 kids.
So they play Fortnite.
Are you serious? Like nonstop.
Well, what ages are your kids? What range?
Well, I can't speak for the ones in college. So
you don't know how old they are? I hope you can speak for that.
I can speak for how old they are, but I can't tell you what they're actually doing. I would prefer to think that
probably drinking.
Yeah, I would prefer to think they're spending all their time playing Fortnite, but I can't prove that. the others, they range from 5. We actually have 8 because my wife has a child from a previous marriage, and he's 15. So really, honestly, from 5 to 15, they're playing. I mean, my 5-year-old's not, you know, she's not killing many people, but she definitely wants to play. So I mean, it's pretty and we used to have Minecraft going nonstop. So I
I like to take quotes from some of my interviews sometime. I think it'd be a good one. My 5-year-old's not killing many people would be a really excellent quote from this pod. That could be like the thumbnail for the video. Like your face doing like this.
I encourage her, to get out there and mix it up, but she's 5.
Makes sense. So what are some other things that you're interested, kind of taking a step away from work, which doesn't really sound like something you do very often, but just to go this direction for a moment. What are some of your hobbies and what other things do you enjoy?
I mean, physically, I like playing tennis. And I mean, look, I read incessantly, or I watch the History Channel incessantly, or things like that. I mean, I'm very, I took Arabic in college, and I'm trying to re-educate myself again, 45 minutes a day.
Nice. Actually, so this is an interesting fact. Both of my parents speak Arabic, and
Really?
they actually met in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
How about that, guys?
it's a hard language to learn,
Yeah.
but
So as a kid, my parents were speaking Arabic, and when you're 5, let's just say, you don't realize there's a difference between but there's a difference between like Arabic and English. You're just a kid, right? So
right.
like we're going somewhere. I thought like Yali ya Habibi was like actually just like English, but it wasn't English. And I think I was at school. I must have been 6 or 7 or 8 years old, and I did well on a test, and I went Hamdulillah, and then one of the other kids was like, "What are you doing?" Like, what? And then I realized I was speaking Arabic. I didn't even know. Little story there. But so you said you've been reading some books lately. What are some of your favorites? Any good recommendations?
Oh my God, I don't even know. My mind is so fractured. I'd have to go look on my.
You don't know what books you've been enjoying?
I've got so much stuff going through my brain.
I can tell.
I can tell. I just watched the series Victoria because my wife basically made me watch it. What books am I reading? I'd have to go to my. I'd have to take you off and go to my Kindle section.
I made a point to read more this year, and so far I've been doing amazing at it. I've read half a book. And I've been like, this is a serious increase in my total amount of reading. Here's what always happens. I get a bunch of recommendations. I buy them, and then I start reading one, and then I end up doing other stuff, and then I forget about it. And then I'm like, oh, I should read books again. And then I go back there for a little bit.
Yeah, I read half books because I don't read fiction. You can kind of stop anytime you want. And I find that people kind of run out of stuff about halfway through the book, but they feel like their publisher wants them to turn in a real book, so it kind of drags on towards the end.
I'm more of a fan of the non-fictions. I've been reading
nonfiction.
I've been reading Fooled by Randomness lately by Taleb. That seems like a good book so far, especially coming from a poker background. If some of you guys are from poker, I'm sure at least some of you guys are. You'd probably enjoy that one as well. But yeah. All right, so let's just go back to crypto here for a couple more questions. So I always tell my viewers, okay, I know how they are. I know what's going through their mind, and they really like the cheap hot alts. So do you have any cheap hot alts that you could recommend to the good viewers of the podcast today?
Nope.
No cheap hot alts?
Nope.
Not even one?
Oh, okay. Well, I have to say I have to caveat this by saying I'm an investor in the company, but I have a company in Argentina that is building a VR version of Fortnite. and it's called Revolution VR. And what they're going to do is they're going to allow you to play games for money. So you'll be able to use your cryptocurrency, and you put up like dollars worth, and other people put it up, and then you can win money. So I mean, they'll have the normal kind, but they also want to have the ability to. It was called the Voxel. Now it's sort of Revolution VR. So if they pull it off and they get this game out in the next 6 months, I think I think they'll do extraordinarily well, and I think the currency will do extraordinarily well. But
there have been some issues in that space recently, right? Like I think something like 3 or 4 months ago, could be wrong on the timeline. Someone lost a couple of dollars betting on some video game, and then called in their house, like tried to what's it called? What's it called when you like call the SWAT? They swatted them, and then they went to the wrong house, and someone came out the front door and got killed. Did you hear about this?
no, I didn't.
Yeah, it was over a $2 video game bet.
Oh my God! Wow, that's not encouraging.
Yeah, I was debating investing in a currency that's trying to do basically make a token where you can use autonomous vehicles. It's called DAV.
Yeah.
And I was debating whether I wanted to invest or not, and then Uber killed that guy, and I was like, was it Uber? Was it Uber's car, or was it Google? Who was it? I forget which one it was.
Tesla, I think.
Oh, was it Tesla? Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, Tesla.
Yeah, that's not a very good look.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, first of all, I'm very cynical about self-driving cars. Just so you know, I think everybody will have a self-driving car, but they will drive it. So I mean, I have a self-driving car; it just drives itself on the highways. But I think the idea that we'll just have these cars that work in every city and every condition, and they drive into my driveway. I mean, the problem with these things is you can't double park them, right? I mean, how many times do we want to double park someplace because we have to? So it's all of the.
Wait, what do you mean double park? Like into
like you want to stop because somebody's running into the grocery store, and like you're pulling behind some car, you're staying in the car, and they're going to run in, they're going to get out, and like there are all these things that we do with our cars that that can't necessarily be programmed into the way they operate.
Sure, but I mean, you could get out and go, and your car could park itself, and you could get out, and your car could pick you up, right?
Yeah, but what if there aren't any open parking spaces? But my point is that we do these things to get around things, and I think if everything you did was totally straight up, like you never pulled into a no parking area for 5 minutes while somebody ran into the convenience store, then it'll be for you. But I think there are too many other little things that won't work.
Halsey, are you really going to sit here and tell me, as you're trying to revolutionize video online and have been in the tech industry for I don't even know how many years long, that you don't think that driverless cars will work because people have to go to grocery stores? Is that your position here today?
No, I think it's more specific. It's because people like double parking.
So are you shorting the Tesla stock?
No, I'm not shorting because they make really good cars. I just don't think one's going to be driving. I don't think my Tesla car is going to be driving around shopping for me anytime soon.
Yeah, not until they get that Amazon partnership.
I mean, it's like, well, okay, so we have a self-driving truck. Like, how does it power itself? Like, where it walks in? Like, who's going to like? I mean, these are like. I mean, I know everything can be solved, but these little things are actually what people care about, and it's like so how's the truck gonna, and then I think there's there are a lot of places where you have snow that you have to worry about. I don't think they feel like they've even in the most I don't think anybody believes they've solved these really kind of horrible condition kind of issues. I mean, in LA, obviously you don't have those kinds of problems. I just think there are going to be lots of little problems. And I'll tell you, the other thing is this Tesla thing was very unfair, because my guess is Teslas have saved far more people than they've killed, but everybody's going to focus on, the bad things that happen. It's just kind of like crypto, right? It's like, this is the fun story to write, to be very cynical. The story that gets you really good ratings, is talk about how Tesla killed somebody new today. And there's no story that says Tesla saves 500 people a year. So I think there are just a whole bunch of, one of the things that, I have to bet on as an entrepreneur, is are really social issues. So to go back to Salesforce, my joke was that the only way Salesforce would ever get into a company was the head of sales who'd been waiting for his CRM software for 2 years would run the head of security down in the parking lot accidentally, because the head of security was always the one saying no. Because you have to remember, Salesforce is outsourcing. It was taking software outside of these guys. So every head of security said, oh, no, to the CEO, you're going to lose the data, and then, you're going to lose your job. And so it was a real social bet. I mean, it wasn't a technology bet. It was a social bet, that I took. So you can't underestimate these social dynamics. And I think there's going to be a really difficult social dynamic with cars. It goes beyond technological. And it's a little silly to say double parking, but I think there are a variety of things that go into how we drive cars that are social issues that are going to be harder to solve than the technical ones.
The media controlling the narrative to create the story they want. And look, I just hate being that guy. And I don't ever want to talk about fake news or any of that type of stuff. But the media absolutely does this all the time. I mean, you don't see 362 days a year the news saying, great day for planes today. Nothing crashed and thousands got there safely. But every time there's one issue with one plane somewhere, it's the feature story, right? Like,
exactly,
happening all the time. I got a little taste of that on a business level. There's a company called Riot Blockchain, and I have a few good friends who work there. And so I've always kind of known, like, generally, like what the company's been up to, and like, basically that they're doing good things. Like, these are good, hardworking people trying to create value and run a legitimate company. And then I just see this CNBC hit piece that gets put out on, like, Riot Blockchain, what's going on? And like they have like the video, and the guy's like on the phone, like, I'm on the phone right now. And like, it's a little suspicious. This guy can't talk to us, isn't it? And it zooms in on his face, and it's like, I know that guy. He's a good guy. He's a legitimate guy trying to do good things. Like, I don't. It's crazy what the media can take and then kind of angle it in the way they want to get the desired result.
Yeah, I'm very cynical. I mean, well, I'll tell you, it's very interesting because my fight with CNET was to make the internet credible. It was, everybody said the internet, the Wall Street Journal used to steal our when we broke stories, they would steal it. They wouldn't give us attribution. So the whole part was, and news.com was like the biggest news site on the internet. It was all tech, but it was by far the biggest news site. And in fact, the 4 years that I was running the company, that the newspaper industry had awards, even though we're not a newspaper company, we got the top news site, in the country. What's happened though is that we've gone from me doing all this stuff to try to raise the level of the internet to be is that all this stuff, all these other companies have just turned to clickbait. I mean, I don't know what the Washington Post does now, but I know there was a story that I was in the Washington Post, and I called them up and said, this story is complete BS. And they said, well, she doesn't even work for us. She's part of our clickbait program. So they have people who literally, and hopefully Jeff Bezos, stop to say, people who wrote articles, and they just got paid on how many clicks there were. And so, what happened was I was trying to raise the level of internet content while the traditional media companies just completely destroyed it. And so, I think it's always been a problem, but I think it's a much greater contemporary problem. And I think that's why, the news and Congress have, media industry and Congress have such low ratings, because I think we're all, we all see, how unbelievably biased, and I think it's only gotten even more polarized. And and for those people who are covered by the media, you sometimes see it in all its glory, and it's really, it's really kind of depressing, to see how stories are just spun around, for the purpose of readership.
It's tough. It's tough. Your video cut out again, by the way, but
Yeah.
there you go. It's tough. I guess I have a little bit of an inside perspective here because having done YouTube videos for a couple of years now, I've gotten to see firsthand what the clicks are like given different subject matters and thumbnail strategies, and titling strategies. And it's tough because the more aggressive strategies are 100% better. 100%.
Absolutely.
It's not even very close.
Yeah.
They are directly better. And so then, the question becomes like, okay, well, what happens if you get more clicks? You get more viewers, you become more
Yep.
known, you get more revenue.
Yep.
And so the question becomes, where is the line that you're okay with as a person or as a business for these businesses? What's the line where you're okay with making your title this or making your title that? And if someone's like, oh, like someone like clicks your video and is like, oh, I hated the title, like I'm never watching that video again or whatever, it's kind of like with a grain of salt. Like, look, man, like I'm here making videos, to have people see them. Like I'm not making videos to just have my friends laugh at them. Like I want my content to get out there so people can see it and hear from me and learn who I am. And so like part of that includes like a relatively aggressive strategy. Now, personally, I try to never go into the line of what I view to be quote clickbait, where it's sort of a bait and switch where you say one thing and then the video is something else. But without going that far, anything kind of under that level, I'm generally okay with, because if you want to succeed, you sort of have to play that game. And particularly for some of these big media agencies, they have to play against each other. And if the other agencies are beating you, then, long run, where does that leave your business? And it's a really unhealthy cycle yeah, I think this is actually one of the biggest problems online today. And I know it's
Yep.
a problem. It's a problem that people don't think about that much. Everyone's like, just don't do it, obviously. And it's like, okay, well,
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I know. Like I said, early on, I saw these wonderful things that the internet was going to do, and it ended up, finding out. I mean, I'll tell you, I hired a guy who was, kind of a giant in the computing industry as a figure, and he wrote an article in one of the big computer magazines, and it was assumed everybody read it, and I ended up paying a bunch of money, and I brought him over, and he started doing it online, and nobody watched, nobody clicked on his stories. And I realized just like how little the magazines actually know about what people actually did with their content. And in some ways this probably was a good thing, because but I paid $1 million in 1997 from Sybase for one of these big databases that did allow you to do data mining. Today they're free. You get Hadoop or something like that, because we had to understand how people, the flow through our services, and Google didn't have services that did it. But it was incredibly important for us to control how people went into certain areas, because we'd have advertising, we had to deliver news, or in our shareware or software sites. So you learn, and the whole thing is inherently manipulative in the end, right? And it's manipulative because you have the data to manipulate it. One of the guys who worked for me ran search for Yahoo, and they started doing pay-per-click stuff. And he spent 3 months trying different fonts, colors, sizes, positions. And within 3 months, he got an extra $25 million a quarter for Yahoo. That's $100 million a year by changing font, color, and position, for clicking. So, it's there's just so much data now that you sort of can't not use it in the way that you so then the question is sort of, where are you being manipulative, and then how are you best running your business, right? And that's the thing that I don't think anybody's been able to figure out yet.
I mean,
and it's really drawing Google and Facebook into a no-win position, I think.
ads specifically are pretty unreal in my eyes. What's just completely legal and you're allowed to do. You can see and I know this because we run ads, albeit at a much smaller scale than what any of these major companies are doing, but we run ads particularly for my training site, my poker training site. And, we can see like, what pages you've been to, what you clicked on, how long you went for, all of this type of stuff. And then you can retarget given like a set of criteria and a new ad set that converts at a given rate. And you're looking at all this stuff, and it's like in the Facebook backend, like it's not like this is like, dark market stuff. This is just like, this is targeting, this is retargeting people and creating ad sets that generate revenue. And you realize that data is unbelievably powerful, and there needs to be, at least in my eyes, some sort of checks and balances on these ginormous media companies or data companies. Really, Google, the value of their data is tremendous. Facebook, the same thing. There needs to be more checks and balances on what they are and aren't allowed to do with that data, and more protection for the end user, because it's just a game right now of how can I use these ad sets at given price points to try and be profitable. And if I can, you just pump as much as you possibly can into the funnel.
Yeah, and I think with things like AI, where you have to feed very large data sets and the implications are, pretty profound, I think that the questions only get more difficult. Google does a good job of identifying my photos, as well, and Apple does a pretty good job as well. But it's because they have lots of data sets of photos with descriptions, so they have the data to train the systems. So, now we're using our data in a completely different way. It's in a way, it's sort of manipulative or not, depending on whether you view, on how you view, AI. So I don't know. I mean, I think I totally hear you, and I think there needs to be, I'm looking at what the European Union is doing with Google, which is they want them to expose their algorithms and how they work. And all I can say is, we have a VR video camera that stitches together all this huge amounts of data and does this amazing stuff. We have like 30 algorithms that are working. It's not like one. And the problem with Google, when they're going to find, is there's not a algorithm that runs Google. There are so many algorithms that are running based on where you are, what you've done. There could be hundreds of algorithms that are all running simultaneously. So it's not so easy as Germany thinks that they just go lay their algorithms on the table and everybody go, okay, I get it. It's way too sophisticated for that now. So I don't know how you create I'm a big believer in transparency. And I don't know how you create the transparency, but I agree with you. Somehow, some way, people have to have a better understanding of what their data can do beyond make the service better.
So let's bring this back full circle here with a question I sort of asked earlier, and it's my last question. I guess it might be a nice way to kind of end the podcast here today. But in your eyes, how is the tech world different today than it was before? And what are some of the changes that you think are for the better and some for the worse? And what would, I guess, maybe some advice be for people who maybe the younger generation, and this is their first time around seeing something like this? What advice would you have for them?
Early on, there was a very small group of people who were innovators and, were creating a lot of value, whatever. And they really were all in Silicon Valley. And it wasn't even a very big group, right? And there weren't even many people who kind of understood technology, because people would start companies in other countries and none of them ever worked. And I think what's happened is just people, the breadth of people who understand technology and can predict and build new services, not only in the United States but around the world, and just how shocking the number of businesses are. In the late 90s, there were like 5 or 6 big companies that were internet companies, right? Now it's like, there are huge companies that you've never really heard of. So I think there's been, a big leveling around the world. Now we have these Chinese companies that are absolutely, enormous. The thing that really, at a very high level, the thing that I like about crypto is when I was starting CNET, my whole business model was breaking open databases. And I would explain to people that, Yahoo, once they launched the weather service, because I would fly to New York all the time, I now knew what the weather was like in New York, and now I could pack. And I mean, you think about that. That's like a simple little thing, but it changes. I now had better clothes when I arrived in New York. What crypto does is it's the same way of distributing information, but you can distribute it with value at the same time. And I think the internet has played out in ways that I never imagined. I mean, there's so many different services, so many different things, right? And I think when you start thinking about, it's not just the sharing of information, it's the sharing of information and value. I think that the level of services that are going to kind of come out of this are going to be profoundly more important than the ones that we have today. And I can't tell you what they are. I can just tell you is that unique ability to be able to send information and money in the same packet is on the face of it a really extraordinary thing. So now we have a whole globe of innovators and entrepreneurs and whatever. And everybody who's in this industry, if you ask them like, where are you tomorrow? They'll say, well, I'm in Dubai, and then I'm in, the crypto world is all over the place, right? And this is a truly global, set of participants. So I think that once some of these things really start working, my belief is that look past all of the shortcomings. I think what's happening is really extraordinary, and it may not happen as fast as people think, but I think the long-term implications of what's happening now with blockchain and money is will probably be the most important thing in my lifetime, and will certainly eclipse the value and the disruption of the internet itself.
Strong words. That was a strong way to go out.
We'll see.
Well, I hope you're right, man.
So am I.
I think we're both pretty heavily invested in you being right. So let's hope that it does. I want to say thanks again for joining us today. A lot of great information. I think that it was cool getting someone with a bit of a different viewpoint than maybe some of the guests that we've had here in the past. But yeah, thanks again for coming on the podcast today.
Hey, no, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. And to you guys, the viewers at home, thank you for tuning in. If you miss any part of it, it'll be up on YouTube or on Spotify, SoundCloud, iTunes, the whole kit and caboodle, if you will. It'll be up on all of those. You can just search for Doug Polk Podcast on any of them. Should be good. We got Tone Vase coming up in just a few weeks. That should be a great one as well. Looking forward to it. And we're also going to be looking for a couple new guests. If you have any ideas, I'm going to tweet something out a little bit later today. You guys can answer who you'd like to see join the pod. I'd like to mix it up a little bit more, to be honest with you. We've got a great lineup of guests. But I like to try and get some new ideas, some new viewpoints on here so that we can have some understanding as to maybe some of the currencies we've not gotten a chance to talk about too much. So definitely interested in your input there. And once again, thank you for joining. We'll have another guest back here Monday. Don't know who it is yet. Going to figure it out and go from there. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you guys later.